Okay, hi everyone. Before I begin, allow me to just share a quick quote. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just need to take the first step, by Martin Luther King. This quote on hindsight resonated with us as we journeyed through the times of pandemic, as we redesigned assessment and learning activities that were more for face-to-face learning. With this, it actually gave birth to our topic today, redesigning assessment with technology as an enabler. So good afternoon to all my fellow educators and the organizers whom we are very grateful for to be given this opportunity to share our experience. I'm Aubrey from Temasek Polytechnic, which is located in Singapore. On behalf of my two colleagues, Chee, Sowmya, I'll be sharing our collected experiences. Okay, Temasek Polytechnic started our online-based learning way back in 2014 when we incorporated this 1 week per semester to be a full online-based learning from home, which we term it home-based learning. So over the next couple of years, we set targets to convert our materials to have more online materials and also roll out bring your own device initiative for all students, which means students have to bring their own laptop to school. Then this year came 2020 and caught all of us unexpectedly when we have to quickly move to 100% home-based learning. Now, the need to align assessment with the learning outcomes and learning activities remains the same, irrespective of the setting, be it home-based learning, online-based learning, or face-to-face learning. Hence, when all lessons were transitioned to home-based learning, there was a need to rethink about assessment design at a subject level without compromising its validity and authenticity, which both are the key assessment principles governing any assessment design, which I suppose that many of you educators, you'll agree with me. So now, the million-dollar question, is it possible to redesign the existing assessment such that we leverage on technology as an enabler? Now, let's review this question using two assessments which we curate from two of our subjects with various contexts. The two assessments to be discussed are from modules related to the built environment discipline. As modules are largely skill-based in our discipline, projects form the best fit as one of the high weightage assessment components for students to apply their knowledge in a real scenario. This also means feedback through frequent group discussions, since project is one of the main components. Though both the assessment to be discussed are project-based, there is a big difference in the learning environment, intervention approaches, and technology use, as you can see on the screen. The assessment modes explored, namely video assessment and learning logs, both being quite generic, and could possibly cover a wide range of applications beyond built environment context. We hope there is a considerable takeaway for most of you educators here in today's conference. So now, let me just deep dive into our first case for discussion, which is video assessment. Okay, now, this module and assessment has been designed for full-time pre-employment students. Prior to this COVID period, actually physical visits to buildings were conducted by lecturers for students to learn about green building features, followed by a face-to-face presentation to share learning from the case study as a summative assessment. In the earlier semester this year, due to the home-based learning requirement, the presentation was converted to video assessment. In our presentation title, if you could recall, technology is only an enabler. So what does this mean? It actually just means that the assessment objective and rubrics have to be kept the same as what was done previously, right? Only the assessment mode was changed to video assessment. That said, we still have to check based on this framework, as you can see on the left side of this slide, that the redesigned assessment is an appropriate replacement that could still meet the original project objective. Be mindful that it is important not to have any unique rubrics pertaining to the redesigned assessment, since this is not part of the original project objective. So we managed, fortunately, to keep the project objective and rubrics the same as the original version. So as mentioned earlier, students visited the actual buildings organized by lecturers. So in the home-based learning environment, students only could do a physical visit on their own. In the video assessment submission, we left it very open on the format. Students could have it in the very basic PowerPoint presentation with just voiceover. Or since they have already visited the building of their choice, they can also do an actual video footage taken on site with video edits using any video editing software of their choice as well. So all these videos were eventually submitted to YouTube. So it is very easy for tutors to view it, as it only requires the YouTube URL or the linkage, right? And does not load on the server space of the learning management systems or any other submission platform that you may be using. Okay, now, yeah, like what I mentioned just now, I didn't manage to activate the audio, so I'll just try to do some voiceover on my own to explain. Okay, so the video on the left is really the conventional PowerPoint with voiceover, right? So can you all hear? I suppose not. Okay, because since I didn't activate the audio. Okay, so this is a very typical PowerPoint presentation. So you can just see that they put in all the technical facts and they are actually just voicing over and presenting as they are doing in a face-to-face presentation. Right. So the key thing is, if your own subjects now have all these face-to-face presentation or previously have the face-to-face presentation as a assessment mode, I think it is really a low-hanging fruit that you can just use this and just plug and play, literally. Okay, so let me just show you a glimpse of the so-called the more creative version, right? Actually, there's some music playing in the background, but I think unfortunately due to this technical issue, you can't hear it. But never mind. Let's see. Have a feel of what it is. So the students actually use an actual video footage, and they just put it in the video with some video editing, and you can see that there's some caption or subtitles, right? So as to make it even better and easy to follow. So eventually they also just highlight, because the project objective is to show the green features. So they show all the green features and they link up to the code or the building regulatory requirements. So the thing is, in our humble opinion, I think the video assessment can be a game changer. As you can imagine how much more that can be presented as compared to the traditional face-to-face presentation. Because if yours is maybe some other subjects of different nature, you can even use I don't know, debate or I mean, the sky is the limit. You can use any other forms and just get your students to video it down. So yeah, you can think about it. So moving on to the next part, while crafting out the assessment, we kept in mind the key assessment principles that guided us through the whole process, which is validity, authenticity, which means we assess only what we want to assess and measure the students' achievement and not of their group members. In fact, in the earlier video, all the students are required to present at least a part in the whole presentation. So this is being authentic as well. And the third point, sustainability or sustainable, came as a bonus. This video assessment actually gives students the opportunity to develop their digital skills in terms of video editing, recording of presentation as well, which, though it is a skill that is beyond the project objective, this is a skill set that is valued in the future or even now. In fact, this skill is in alignment with Temasek Polytechnic's desired graduate profile, which are the generic skill set we want to develop in all of our graduates. So some feedback results. As you can see, the usual intended skill set to be developed from a project is still being developed. So we are not shortchanging the students on anything. As you can see over here, communications, time management, teamwork, self-discipline, planning, typical of any project work, right? But over and above, students also develop their digital skills and creativity because of the video creation aspects. So now some qualitative feedback. You can see as well over here as highlighted. These comments further reinforce the skill set we mentioned in the earlier part. Like for example, digital skills, creativity, all these communication, self-learning opportunities. So I think it further echoed the fact as mentioned over here on the right side of the slide as well. So one thing that might be in your mind right now, if you are thinking that, hey, you're not familiar with all these video editing aspects, so how? In fact, there's no cause of concern, okay, because these students being digital native, they are the younger full-time students in this example, they have no problem picking up these skills on their own, as many did, even though it was their first time doing video filming and editing. And we have to just be a little bit mindful if the students are adult learners. I'm not too sure if your students belongs to the adult learners, where this is a student group we'll be looking at in the second assessment example, which I'll be covering next. But that said, it shouldn't be a huge impediment or a huge obstacle, because nowadays I think YouTube, we have ample resources for us to self-learn. Right. So this brings us to the second scenario for discussion. This assessment learning log, similar to the previous sharing, involve a specific building or case-based task as a high weightage project assessment. However, the entire learning environment and technology application is rather different. The subject to be discussed targets part-time working professionals, as I mentioned earlier on, they are the adult learners, and is designed based on adult learning principles. The application of technology, contrary to the previous video assessment, instead of summative, this focus on formative assessment, which is to diagnose students' learning gaps and to provide helpful feedback for the project. Usually, in a physical classroom setting, ours is about 30 to 40 students. There are frequent small groups consultation, which involve the tutor moving from groups to groups as a form of scaffolding and providing feedback on subtasks or projects of bigger scale, right? So you can see this primary mode being formative. The some reasons for giving feedback on the left side of this slide as well, which I think you can see that. So in view of the constraints posed by home-based learning, class size, higher order application, right? The user used this online authoring platform Padlet for students to post key learning points, photos where all students have access to it. This formative project-based feedback based on learning logs enabled by Padlet embrace 4 basic conditions that work together to support students' natural interest in learning, as you can see on the right side under the motivation framework, namely inclusion, positive attitude, meaning, and engendering competence. So for those who are not familiar with Padlet, this is really how it looks. You can just configure it in a column format or even free-form format in randomized, where students post their comments, their photos, everything. So this, as you can see, as students can see all their classmates post, they can learn from one another and gain different perspective. So this aspect of inclusion of everyone will enhance the competency of the students when they learn collectively. Also, the posts are different as the scenario chosen to be analyzed are mostly different. So in this example, the case study chosen was students' own workplaces or homes. And this personal relevance actually shapes their attitude for increased motivation. So now, these are just some examples of the case studies that we give the students. So these learning logs, which are meant for scaffolding and to give feedback as mentioned, they can complete their project and to be on track. And these are some examples that I've just mentioned earlier on. And since the case study chosen were places students were familiar with, the relevance add meaningfulness to the task. And the basic assessment principles of validity, authenticity were ensured as well for the development of competence desired of the project. Review, identify, and discuss. These are the 3 steps we took to give formative feedback. Firstly, the entries were reviewed a day before every lesson. Posts that were well done, posts that have common misconception were identified. At the start of the lesson, probably about 5 to 6 posts were discussed, and they also form a good recap or introduction to the next lesson, which forms the key ingredients of a good and effective lessons. Also, as shared before, these are opportunities for mass feedback if concepts have been applied correctly through focused, short, open-ended tasks. The key when creating these tasks is that it must be transferable to the project. Posting a sample log entry, setting word limit, organization of log entries. In this case, is according to the class register number, helps ensure meaningful posts and reduce review time for feedback. So some feedback from the students. As you can see, most students agree that the tasks are authentic and meaningful, as you can see at the top. Of the slides over here, that because it relates to real life content, authentic, allows for different views, more productive as time taken to complete is lesser. So the indicate the outcomes of a higher intrinsic motivation among adult learners, which is one of the key essence in moving people towards lifelong learning. So now, to end it off, as we move to a new norm in learning, perhaps more hybrid mode, a mix of home-based learning, face-to-face setting, the question is there still room for us to make use of this redesigned assessment as discussed earlier on? And are you able to customize these approaches to fit your own subject content? So I think it is an opportune time for me to just leave these thoughts as I conclude. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Aubrey. I see there is a question from Paul Lam, and his question is, what is the workload of teachers using these new assessment methods, and will their workload hinder teachers' motivation to train?
Okay. Probably some background. The video assessment I implemented in my subject. For the Padlet, my colleague Sowmya is handling it. So perhaps I could just speak for myself, right? For the video assessment part, in fact, just to assure some of you, if you are really thinking of using video assessment, I'm not a professional in video editing. Really, I think my knowledge of video editing is really quite basic. So in terms of probably time taken, commitment, if I'm answering your question correctly, I think it is really not much really, because I just piece out because like what I said, the rubrics, project objective, everything is still the same. So I just need to draft out the requirements in the project document so as to ensure that the level of understanding in terms of the deliverables as a video assessment is clear to the students. I think that's basically all for the video assessment part. Probably I'll just let Sowmya answer the other part.
I'm afraid it's time for the next presentation.
All right.